studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. This is the Spit Sports Show. Well, here we are at the point of the season in which we will decide whether the Vancouver Canucks had either the worst season in 10 years or just a very bad season. So, when it came down to the trade deadline and the Canucks did what they did, not moving anybody, they basically admitted that this is already a failure of a season, with the ceiling of this failure of a season being a first round exit to either Winnipeg or whoever they're going to end up playing in the first round. They have made that their priority for this season by not selling Besser and Suter and all of these guys who you could have gotten real assets for at the deadline if you were willing to cut your losses. They weren't willing to do that. So, like I said, ceiling is the playoffs. So, how do they get to that ceiling at this point? Well, this week is going to have a huge part of it, especially two games, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But they already played one of those games last night, and that game was just awful in terms of its result. But there was some good to come out of it in terms of trends in the right direction for this team. Like, I really liked that Pedersen just called his own number on that power play. He just decided, you know what? I'm going to take it from this top left spot and just rip it past the goalie. I really liked that. I thought that was the most assertive that he's been on the power play. And just overall, he had a phenomenal game. He led the Canucks in expected goals percentage and Corsi percentage. He looks like he is starting to round back into form, which is very good. Brock Besser, too, looks like he's starting to come into form as well after these last three-ish games where you could tell that he didn't quite have his legs underneath him the way he did before. Now, how much did that have to do with his GM basically calling out his trade value? I don't know. I probably would take a bit of a hit to my pride and, give me a bit of a confidence issue for a little bit. I don't know, but he looked better. Philip Peronic looked awesome, but he's been looking awesome ever since Hughes went out. Like, he is really proven that he can be the driver of his own defensive line. And I think this is going to open it up so he might be able to split up Hughes and Hronik, so you have two really good defensive pairs. Just an idea. But in general, the Canucks actually did, I thought, outplayed the Habs yesterday. It was 75% on the deserve to win-o-meter for the Canucks. I thought that overall they pushed the pace of play, especially in the halfway from the second period all the way into the third period. But there were a couple of negative elements also. First of all, and this is one that hasn't been talked about a lot, but Jonathan Lekermecki has been talked about around this city like he's going to come in and be the new Brock Besser archetype. His shot does not look impressive to me at all. It doesn't look like it has much zip on it. He had a clear chance, really unguarded from the slot, and he just kind of shot it right at the Habs goalie's chest. And just from a general standpoint, I don't see dynamic skating ability. And when you don't have dynamic skating ability as a so-called goal scorer, you need to have an unbelievable shot. And I didn't see any sort of indication in these last however many games it's been, three or four, that he is going to have that kind of shot that's going to translate into the NHL. And ultimately, in general, the Canucks lost a consequential game at this point in the season, which has huge impact on their playoff odds, which I'll get into later. That's just something they cannot do at this point in the season when they're just hanging right on that edge of playoffs, no playoffs. So, to get into the playoffs, it's really simple. They're probably going to have to catch the Flames, who they are 1 point behind for the second wild card spot. They're 7 points behind the Wild for wild card number one. So they're probably not going to be able to catch them. So how do they get to that point? Well, the Canucks, unfortunately, do have quite a bit of a challenge remaining. They have the 12th hardest schedule left remaining. Their opponents have a combined winning percentage of above 500 at .555. The Flames, though, it's not like they have a cruise control to this playoff run either. They have the 17th hardest. So they are right in the middle of the pack at 0.549. So it's not like these two teams have a big difference in variety in terms of the end of their season here. If you want to know, the Wild have the 11th hardest at 0.556. So all of these teams are very, very close in terms of how their schedule looks going forward in terms of the quality of teams that they play. So if you look at it on paper, you would think that the Canucks should be able to make the playoffs because Calgary's roster, for as much respect as I have for them and what they've done this year, especially their goaltender, their roster is in a rebuild year. Like their first line of Kadri, Huberdeau, and Coronado is fine. I like a lot of their defense. I think Mackenzie Weegar is awesome. And like I said, this guy, Dustin Wolf, he's not going to win Rookie of the Year because Celebrini and Hudson have been so good. But in a different season, he definitely more than have his name in the hat. But this Flames team only has a couple of guys over 50 points. They're obviously very well coached. They remind me actually a lot of the Capitals from last year, just in the Western Conference this time. So I think on paper, it's pretty obvious that the Canucks are a better team than Calgary and Utah, who is right behind them in the standings. I think they're 2 points back. So the sports books say the Canucks are 16th in terms of cup rankings, odds to win the Stanley Cup. The Flames are down, excuse me, geez. It's been a couple times this episode. I've been trying to hit the high point and my voice just goes. Sorry about that, guys. But the Flames are 22nd in cup odds. So clearly the sports books think that these two teams are in the same area, but there's clearly one team at the higher end of that playoff fringe window, and it's the Canucks, not the Flames. So for them to get ahead of the Flames, it's really simple. They play the Flames tonight. They play the Flames tonight and Utah on Friday, I think. And like I said, Utah's only 2 points behind them. So that's going to be a huge game. And between these two teams on paper, like I said, the Canucks have the best roster, especially with Hughes. So if I'm saying all of that, if the Canucks clearly have the better roster in these other two teams' rebuild years, then why are they behind the Flames right now? Well, this is from The Athletic's Thomas Drance, who covers the Canucks on a daily basis, and I really enjoy his stuff. This is from him. Across the Canucks' last 8 games, centermen Elias Pettersson and Philip Hedl, the club's top 2 centermen, have been on the ice for roughly 212 minutes at 5-on-5. In those minutes, the Canucks have scored just 2 and have surrendered 12 against. Well, there's your main issue. Like, the centerman is who drives offensive play. And I know I'm not making up any new mandates while saying that. It's pretty well known and common sense that the middle is where the speed is created. Like, I go back to that Jake DeBrusk quote that I used the other day, where he said, speed through the middle is probably the number one thing, I think, for every rush team. You can't have you can have wingers that are fast, but you need it to go through the middle to distribute. Facts. So you have two guys who are not playing well, but for two totally different reasons. Like Hedl is too assertive. He's too aggressive. He makes bad decisions. He takes the puck in when he should dump it. He makes an extra move when he's just totally unnecessary to do so. He'll try a one-on-one move when there's another guy coming in from the slot who he can probably hit in the middle. Now, I've liked how Hedl's looked, don't get me wrong, and I don't want him to lose that aggressiveness. But tone it down just a little bit. Play within the system a little bit. I like people trying to get outside of that Tocchet system, trying to create offense. I do, trust me. And he's been a breath of fresh air for this Canucks team that's just looked so slow in the neutral zone. But he plays like a chicken with his head cut off just a little bit. And he needs to get it under control. But on the other end of that is Pettersson, who is way too under control and too passive and not aggressive enough, which is why I thought last night was such a good sign for him, taking that shot on the power play and being a lot more assertive around the net areas. He looks unconfident and passive. Hedl looks overconfident and aggressive and poor decisions. So I'd obviously rather the aggressiveness over the non-aggressiveness. Pettersson is averaging 1 shot a game since the Four Nations tournament. And it's not like he hasn't been shooting it that well either. He's shooting at a 12.5% clip, which is actually just above league average. On the contrary, though, Hedel has been shooting the puck like crazy. But he's at 3 shots a game with a 3.8% clip shooting. So again, it's just contrarily bad centerman play. So you have Pettersson, who's not shooting at all but has a great percentage. You have Hedel, who's shooting a bunch but has a terrible percentage. And you put those together and you just don't score goals. Like, everything is going wrong for the Canucks down the middle this year, except for Rick Tocchet finally put Teddy Bluger back with Joshua and Garland, which I've been calling for all season long. Finally, they did that. I don't know why it took so long. So they're going into this stretch with 2 back-to-backs. So they had the Habs last night, which I talked about. Then they have the Flames tonight. And then they have the Blackhawks and then Utah. So that back end is obviously the most important game in both of these situations, the Flames and the Hockey Club. Those are the 2 teams that you're fighting for the playoffs with. So what do you do with Kevin Lankinen, who is by far and a mile the Canucks' best goalie? And it looks like Demko's still going to need at least another couple of weeks to get back into NHL form. So they played him last night, which I thought was flatly the wrong decision. I would have played Seelovs last night, started Lankinen tonight. And then for the next back-to-back, you know what I would have done? I would have started Seelovs against the Blackhawks, and I would have started Lankinen against the Utah Hockey Club. I feel like that just makes sense, that you want your best goalie to play in the games that matter the most. Like, I don't know, 2 + 2 = 4, guys. Like, this isn't overwhelming analysis. It's just common sense. But I feel like common sense is what this team has been lacking for the last 50 years, it feels like. So I'm just trying to put more of it into the world for you guys. Like I said, this is already a failure of a season. Ever since really Miller got traded, we knew that this ship was going down. But the best case scenario for the rest of this season, if we look at it through our rose-colored glasses, is the Canucks make the playoffs. They win a couple games in the first round, maybe push it to game 6, maybe get a third home playoff game. You know how much Aquilini would love that. Get bounced, and hopefully re-sign 2 of the 3 of Besser, Suter, and Forber. That's the goal. The worst case scenario is you miss the playoffs, you get a bad pick, not a lottery pick, and all 3 guys walk for nothing. And with how this team has been playing, it sure looks like we're headed for the worst case scenario. If they beat the Habs last night, the Canucks, they would have had a 42.4% chance to make the playoffs. With that loss, it is now down to 27.3%. Now, if they beat the Flames tonight, it goes up to 33%, which is still only a third of a chance to make the playoffs. And if they lose, it goes all the way down to 19%, in which you're probably just done and cooked at that point. Also in this game, it's the battle between the 31st and 32nd ranked teams in goals scored since January 1st. So it's sure to be a blockbuster game. But like, what makes this season so frustrating is not just the fact that it's a completely wasted year, the fact that if we lose tonight, we're probably out of the playoffs. And even if we win, there's still a lot less than a coin flip's chance that we make it. It's that not only did we have a ridiculous amount of cap space to work with at this trade deadline, which we could have used to be flexible in any direction. We could have used it to be aggressive. We could have used it to sell. It was the best seller's market I've ever seen at a trade deadline. Like, they paid a 4th round pick earlier this season to get rid of Tucker Pullman's LTIR deal, just so they could have cap space at this trade deadline. They've been taking money out of Arshdeep Bains and Lekkermecki's pocket, sending them up and down from the AHL to the NHL, trying to save money throughout the year. And they just did nothing with it. Nothing. And like I said, they've left themselves in this position where your best case scenario isn't great. Your worst case scenario is awful. And right now it looks like they're on the speed path to the worst case scenario. And that really stinks. If they beat the Flames tonight, they're right back up to a 33% chance just to get bounced in the first round. What a disaster of a season. What do you guys think of what I had to say today? Man, I'm very, very sad for the Vancouver Canucks right now. If you agreed, if you disagreed with what I said, please leave a comment in the comments section below. I am small enough as to where I can read all comments and love doing so. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed what you heard. Please subscribe if you haven't already. The Spit Sports Show just hit over 400 subscribers. And as always, I will see you all in the next one. Peace out. Love you guys.